Hey folks, James Abrenio coming to you on JamesPod. This video is going to be a little bit different than what I intended to do, and frankly, I just don't have enough content to know what I usually do. But it is July 24th, about 10:04 a.m., and I decided to shoot a quick video, I think, on the Epstein files. I will tell you, I did not intend to talk about topics like this, but as I've said before, I don't really know what I'm doing with this podcast. Exploring. But one of the things that I wanted to make sure I did when I did these podcasts is try to be authentic as possible, because I think that's important when you're spending your time to listen to me, and the least I can do is be authentic with you. And so the title of this video, I think, is pretty presumptuous. What do I think Democrats should be asking about the Epstein files? Who am I? I'm not an elected official. I haven't held elected office. I'm not high up in the Democratic ranks. I know some elected officials that are pretty cool and I think doing some great work, but what does my opinion matter from Sam, right? It shouldn't matter. But I will tell you that this morning I haven't yet had breakfast because I went and got my blood work drawn for physical. I just had a kid, decided I need to make sure that I'm healthy for her. I've been talking to some close friends of mine. One particular, you know who you are, who's been getting me wrangled up about the Epstein stuff. And I've obviously been paying attention to social media and you know the broader context of what's going on. And I can quickly see where this is going. It's delving into kind of this just mess of politics. I suspect, here's my prediction, is what's going to happen several months down the road. It's going to become just another quote Russiagate thing that, you know, if you're a Trump supporter, you're going to absolutely believe is a complete hoax. He's going to use the Epstein hoax or whatever terminology he's going to use. And if you're don't like Trump, you're going to see this for what it is, and you're going to have a lot of issues with it. But I think where I can bring a kind of a unique view is, in addition to my involvement in being interested in politics, I'm a defense attorney. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've also represented a lot of victims in criminal prosecution. So I've been around a lot of criminal investigations in my career, both on the defense side and also representing victims. I will say vast majority of my work has been at the state level, not the federal level. But I think that my viewpoint may provide an interesting take on it. Because as I'm sitting here listening to, what should happen, should the Epstein files be released, should they not? Democrats saying they should be released. In fact, at some point, I know that I was pushing for it too, and I still sort of am. And then now Republicans are kind of circling the wagons and saying, oh, it's been corrupted by Democrats' investigation, and Obama or Biden planted something in there intentionally, and this was all a trick somehow by the Democrats to get Trump. And this is just like all the criminal charges against him that had no validity. So we can see what's happening. But the one question that I'm not seeing asked a lot is, what do the actual victims want in this case? Because at the foundation of what we're talking about here, we're talking about an individual named Jeffrey Epstein that did horrific acts that victimized countless women and have destroyed lives, and if not destroyed, severely negatively impact countless lives. Again, having been involved in a lot of both criminal and civil investigations, representing both criminal defendants as well as victims in those investigations, what I can objectively say is that what happened in Florida was objectively absurd. For Jeffrey Epstein to have been given a deal that just involved essentially a year in jail, where he got to essentially get out on work release 6 days a week, 2 charges, when anybody else that did not have his influence would have been looking at life probably for that behavior, and if not, should have been looking at life. And you have a prosecutor, last name Acosta, who gave this sweetheart deal. And in my understanding, at least, victims in those cases were not even really consulted. This deal was given essentially in the middle of the night and rushed through the courthouse, and the victims weren't even aware that it was happening when it was happening. And they were truly re-victimized. And what is amazing that you may or may not know is subsequently, once Trump gets in the office his first term, he appoints a labor secretary who ends up being that exact same prosecutor who ended up having to be resigned because his own base, Trump's own base, was concerned about his behavior in the Epstein case. So it is objectively clear the prosecution in the Epstein case in Florida was flawed from the beginning. I don't know why. I have my thoughts, but he got a deal that should never have gotten done. And I am certain that more victims came beyond that because he was allowed to continue. Okay. So now we fast forward to this situation. And we have in this administration, Pam Bondi, who was Trump's former attorney. We have Todd Blanche, who is deputy attorney general, who is Trump's former personal attorney. We have Kash Patel. We have Bongino, who were advocates for releasing these files. You even had an event where Pam Bondi produced a binder that was supposed to be the new Epstein files, and the true believers in getting to the truth, for whatever reason, you can call them MAGA base or whatever, they were very obsessed with this case. They thought that they had new evidence, and it turned out that that wasn't the case. And as we are now seeing, it turns out that back in May, Pam Bondi apparently told Trump that he was in the files, and then you see this obvious cascade of events to prevent the disclosure of those files. Not because they actually cared about the victims. It's clear about that because I forgot on what podcast I heard Kash Patel saying that the reason that they're not going to release these files is because they don't want to re-victimize the victims. You have this about face, and then you have Trump essentially trying to pretend like it was never an issue in the first place. Let's move the ball. What I want to know, before they decided to close down the file, the DOJ decided to close down the file, decided there was nothing else to see here. I want to know, did they actually reach out to the victims in this case, and did they actually ask for their input? Did they actually care about what they went through? Did they actually care about what the evidence showed and what questions those victims still had about what went on? Did they ask about how far does this network run? And I'm not saying that other people were involved. I'm talking about Epstein's own network. Hell, it seems like apparently only now have they even reached out to Ghislaine Maxwell at the most interesting time you could possibly have. Now, of course, you're going to have Republicans say that this is a witch hunt, that Democrats only care now because they want to go after Trump. Look, that may absolutely be true. I think that there's a lot of Democrats who are seizing on the moment politically. I certainly understand that from a politics side. In a lot of ways, I think it makes sense because, in my view, once you open the door to an issue, you can't close it just because you see that it's an issue that doesn't help you. And it was clear that you haven't even had J.D. Vance right before the election saying that they need to release the files. And all of a sudden now he's acting like it's just horrific that this is being asked about. What I want to know, though, is what efforts did this DOJ make beyond just trying to flag how many times Trump's name was in the files and then warn him about it and then tell him we shouldn't release the files and then try to cover up what happened. What I want to know is what effort that they made to reach out to the victims in this case, and what efforts they made to show that they actually demonstrated they care, because that's what this is about. That's what the files are about. That's what the DOJ's job should be. Now, the other questions we should be asking is, how is it possible that the public would ever trust this Department of Justice to handle this investigation? Because the reality is both Pam Bondi and both Todd Blanche, they should have recognized from day one that it was a conflict of interest as members of the bar, as lawyers, to represent both Trump in the personal capacity, which they did previously, and then to come into this administration where they represent not Trump, they represent the American people. And so from a lawyer 101 standpoint, you cannot have a conflict of interest. And it's not even just a conflict of interest, it's the appearance of a conflict of interest. And they knew by being his personal attorneys back then that it presented as an appearance of a conflict of interest. But not only that, I believe that the actions are clear by them, that their current actions are an ongoing conflict of interest. I want to know what efforts they are making to actually protect Trump rather than figure out for the American people what actually happened here. That's what their job is. Now I'm seeing that they are suggesting that they're going to go interview Ghislaine Maxwell, and they're going to get down to the truth of the matter and figure out what's going on. Now, of course, what do we all expect is going to happen? Republicans are saying, and MAGA particularly are saying, look, now they're just doing their job, and Democrats are complaining that they're concerned that Republicans and the Trump administration now want to reach out to Ghislaine. Isn't that what you want in the first place? The reality is they have so corrupted this process that they are conflicted out of doing that investigation. And here's what I think Democrats need to be asking is, why is a special counsel, an independent special counsel, not being appointed immediately to figure out what's going on? For two things. Number one, to find out what the victims want, to figure out what actually happened, to figure out if there are actually prosecutable cases still. Is that preserved, or is the deal that Acosta gave Epstein back in Florida in, I think, 2016, does that essentially preempt them from doing anything? They need to figure that out. They need to figure out the victim's input on whether or not these files should be released or not, and weigh that in. Just like I would expect any prosecutor in any criminal case, in any federal or state case, when they're prosecuting or investigating a case. I'm also a defense attorney. I'm not one of those guys that think that it's appropriate for names to just be thrown out so people can start alleging and making invalid accusations. So that's part of it. We need to figure out what the victims want. And if the victims say, we don't want anything said, we don't want any input, and they are actually saying that, then so be it. Who are we to question that, right? I think would be compelling reasons to then not release the files. Understand that. But this DOJ is not in a position to make that investigation and to be trusted by the public, and frankly, to be trusted by the victims themselves. Because you have literal personal attorneys who represented Trump now supposedly representing the American public, and it is glaringly a violation of ethics, a violation of conflict of interest. They need to be done with it. Everybody in the Republican Party should be pushing for an independent special investigation. But also, that's not the end of it. I want to be clear about that. We also need to figure out what the Trump administration has done in order to cover Trump's tracks. Because again, it is not the job of the Attorney General or the Department of Justice to protect Trump politically. That is not their job. That's the reason that you don't hire your personal attorney as a DOJ head, as Attorney General. That's the reason you don't just install your loyalists. There needs to be some separation. And this case makes exactly proof why. Because now you see that they're making actions, I think clearly, that are in conflict with the American public and in line with what is in line with Trump's best interest. If you're his private attorney, go at it. That is your job. But you can't serve both roles. So I think an independent investigator and a special counsel needs to figure out what inappropriate actions this administration has taken with a conflict of interest of saying that they care about the American public but trying to protect Trump's interest. Now, people may say, James, that's absurd. How dare you? That's never been done, all these kinds of things. I want to be clear. Trump opened this door by hiring his personal attorneys to be heads of the DOJ, to be heads of the Attorney General's office. And well, I guess Kash Patel is an attorney. Apparently, he went to University of Richmond. I think he's actually my age. And if he truly is an attorney, he should know better. I mean, he should know better. And if he's not speaking out, he should be speaking out, especially if you're at the University of Richmond. I did my last year there. He should know better. This has become, and I will say, as a criminal defense attorney, and I've been about criminal justice reform, too many times in my career have I seen inappropriate behavior by prosecutors and by elected officials using victims of crimes to benefit themselves politically. It just happens, and I get it. It's a hard role as a prosecutor. I'm not going to pretend that I would be able to weave that needle clearly. There's the goal of speaking out in behalf of victims, making sure you push a case forward. But far too often, I've seen cases that have been purely politically pushed, and that's both Democrat and Republican. I understand that, but this is a case now where the Trump administration has put this before the American people, and it is inappropriate to just say, you know what, freeze, we take it back, let's move on. And if you're saying that it is the Democrats' fault for this, I would ask you to ask yourself, what do the victims actually want? Because if you truly believe that this is about the victims and you hear that the victims don't want this to be released, then that should be it, okay? If you truly care about corruption and the absence of it in our government, then you should want to know what, if anything, Trump did inappropriately to cover his butt. All right. And I don't think you need to release victim information in order to do that. In a lot of ways, you don't even need to release the substantive information about what's in the Epstein files. I want to see the communications between Pam Bondi and Trump that were essentially involved in a cover up. And just to be clear, while there is attorney-client privilege ordinarily, if it's used for a fraud, there's exceptions there, right? And so if we're in a situation where you have our attorney general serving truly as the personal attorney of Donald Trump, then that is a breach of the trust. If you have a situation where Todd Blanche is serving as personal attorney to Donald Trump, that is a breach of trust. And look, if I'm Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, I understand what his goal is. And I think there's some weird network where he's kind of representing Hillary Clinton now, also represents Ghislaine Maxwell. So he complimented the Trump administration on trying to get to the truth of it. I get it. He's doing his job. He represents an individual, Ghislaine Maxwell, and his goal should be to get her out of jail by any means necessary that is legal, that is not corrupt. Okay. He has an ethical duty to abide by the best interest of his clients. I absolutely understand that. And do I think that if Todd Blanche offers a pardon to his client, that he has an obligation to offer that client? Absolutely, he should. I understand that from a lawyer standpoint. He's doing nothing unethical. He should take the meeting. Totally understand that. But should it be Todd Blanche in there? Absolutely not. The public doesn't trust it anymore. And that's the reason, at the very least, Democrats should be asking, number one, what do the victims want? And number two, what has Trump done? And how do we figure that out? And number three, why is there not a special prosecutor, an independent counsel that is completely independent of the administration that's doing this evaluation? But hell, what do I know? Good luck, guys. Have a good rest of the day.